Welcome to Pond. My name is Mitch Stein. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and Chief Impact Officer. We want to make tech work for good. So we're highlighting and uplifting the critical parts of the impact technology ecosystem through human conversations with the leaders and shapers of the industry. Let's jump in. Meet Mike Smith, a passionate technologist who took it on himself to fix tech problems that plagued the causes he cared about most. Taking the accountability and cooperation instilled in him during his time in the Navy, he's tackling online fundraising issues hand in hand with the nonprofit community. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today for this chat. And could you start off by introducing yourself and your company?
Yeah, happy to be here, Mitch. So thanks for asking me. I'm Mike Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Customizability. We're a customizable online giving platform.
And could you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to want to start a company serving the impact sector?
Yeah, so it's kind of been like a lifetime professional development to get me to where I am today. So to date myself, I had actually started building custom data-driven websites back around 2000. After a little bit of time, I ended up at one of the largest alumni associations in the country and started running web operations for them. And that's really when I got involved in the service sector. And that's where I really started to feel like I was at home with the people, the mission, just helping in general. It was really awesome. And I just loved the environment. Again, it's the people you meet, the people you work with, and the people you get to help. And as I looked out in the landscape, I saw, and there are a lot of issues that nonprofits are facing with their technology, from the painful donation forms for the donor to fundraising teams who didn't seem like what they were doing in their fundraising strategies was ever really reflected on their website with their giving forms. And so I was thinking, why is that disparity there? Like, why is there a disconnect between what they're doing and what you see when you end up on the website to make a gift? And at the same time, a lot of my peers in higher education were saying, what we're using now isn't working for us. We don't know what to do next. And I kind of had an idea of what was coming, what they needed to do. And so I set out to build it. And that's why I founded the company. Amazing. And what, obviously from that initial vision and kind of what you set out to do to today, I know it's several years ago, how do you think the core vision or mission of the company has evolved or stayed the same? Like, what's been the biggest change for you? I wanted our company to be able to provide tool sets to any nonprofit, regardless of how much money they had to spend. I wanted a small volunteer nonprofit, the volunteer-run nonprofits, to be able to launch a customized online giving platform with no tech staff and no budget. Like, that was one of my goals. And so we really saw the traction in just the general nonprofit more than in higher ed. So it wasn't really a refocus of the product, because it went across the board, but it was a refocus of where we were putting our efforts, who we were communicating with. I went out in my own community and I'm involved with the nonprofits here in Florence, and just started picking up clients just by talking to people. And so our focus had kind of shifted a little bit. But the product itself, when you start listening to hundreds of nonprofits about what they need, we're trying to balance, what do we see as what's going to be important in the coming years that we want to prepare for, but then what are people saying they need? And when it makes sense to make those enhancements in our product, we do it. And so we've done a lot of changes to the product, just because one client says, I really need this. And we're like, damn, that makes a lot of sense, and then everybody starts adopting it. So that's been a fun process. But I mean, from where we were at launch in late 2017 to where we are now, it's not a totally different product, but it's much more customizable and has a lot more features than, we had planned on. Yeah, and it's always best for that evolution to be guided by the customer. And it's great that you've been able to follow that so closely. How, and I'm sure you've heard from customers about experiences with other tools or solutions. What do you feel like really differentiates custom donations? I would say the foremost is just the customizability of it. So we can get a nonprofit online within the hour with a seamless donation form inside their website that's secure and PCI compliant. To me, having that experience where it's with the nonprofit, and you're not bouncing off to some third party to conduct the transaction. Because I don't like that disconnect when you jump off. I think the ideal scenario for me and the donor with respect to the organization is they're on the website. So I think the way that we embed, the way that we can match everything within their website is, I think, is one of the big ones. Also, just ease of use. Again, we when we get people sign up, usually I like to go see who they are, what their website is, what their current solution is, and sometimes by the time I get to their website, our stuff is already in there working. So that's exciting to see. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think there's nothing more satisfying than it's like the teach a man to fish thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like great to give something away, but really satisfying to see them run away and be successful with it. So,
Yeah.
and it sounds like you are just hand in hand with your customers and working with so many cause areas and even in your own local community. So it might be hard to pick one, but is there something that's really near and dear to your heart, or a particular organization or event that got you especially drawn into the sector?
There's been two really, and they were more personal to me because it was more of a testament to what we were doing is working. And so one was kind of a medium-sized nonprofit, and they were running a campaign, and their initial approach was the typical: you can go to our giving form, select it from the drop down, and give to that area, which is fine. That gets the job done. But then on their own, they decided to set up a new web page for this particular campaign, make a new giving form for it, and then embed the giving form there. And that weekend, this was in August, that weekend, they processed more money than they had in the entire year in one weekend.
Wow.
Because it was that effective, but it also kind of went viral. And I don't think that would have happened if it was just using their main giving form. So for me to see a non-technical fundraiser implement their own pages and forms and then watch it be successful for them was really exciting. And there was another one for university where it was a very similar scenario where their typical audience is people who've graduated and they have a particular ask and they ask a lot of personal information, but they were doing a lot of work on campus because they were trying to start that culture of philanthropy while the students are there, which is a great approach. And they're saying, well, when we're there talking to them and they get excited and they want to give and they pull out their phone and they end up on this giant form that asks a lot of personal information, and the suggested asks aren't what we're asking them for because it's a totally different tier level. It was just a bad flow. So we said, well, you're already using custom donations for some other forms that you have. Let's create a new form for a student. You only have to ask one piece of information, their student ID number, because the data teams can reconcile the data after the fact. So it just took an afternoon, and they had a completely new customized flow just for those students, and that worked out well. So it's exciting to see that, and I love working with the fundraisers where they can have ideas of like, well, let's just do it like this, and then they can do it and implement it, and then see it live without too much trouble.
All right. Oh, that's awesome. And it's exciting to see your growth and adding new customers. And I know as you're thinking about expanding your team and even doing so in a virtual world, what are kind of the custom donation cultural principles you think of either looking for or instilling in people, and how do you keep that intact?
I've always been drawn to like passionate, talented people, and especially those who are either in the sector or just want to do good in general. And so, that's kind of what I'm seeking out of people who love what they do. I don't know if that sounds like a cop out because who wouldn't want that, but I'm kind of looking for those type of people who just can bring a lot to the table. But again, I want us to treat every nonprofit like they are our only client, whether they're big or whether they're small, and help them succeed in what they're doing. Because when we do that, I feel like we're having a small effect in communities all around the country, which is just exciting for me. So it's definitely a certain type of person, but being in the service sector, they're all over the place. But having worked in different industries, you don't always see that passion about what we do and why we do it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a cop out at all. I actually think that's the best answer, honestly, because if you're looking for 7 to 10 years experience doing XYZ, like, sure, yeah, you need a certain level of experience, but pales in comparison to someone loving what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there were people who I worked with 10 years ago, and I make a note of, hey, I want to work with this person, and then try to hire them when I have a company, because I know, that's the kind of person I want one on my team.
Yeah, no, it's a great attitude. So I guess moving into the customers you're working with and just problems you've seen, help solve, still want to solve.
Hmm.
Why do you think so many organizations are still behind with their digital fundraising tech? As I see a lot, hundreds of nonprofits, and the number of websites I go to where I like have that cringe moment, I always go to check the donate button, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, why?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah. I'll probably get myself in trouble with this one. Because it kind of seems like, in a lot of cases, they're just a lot of rusty pipes duct taped together, leaking all over the place, but they're like, it's working. And it's like, no, your staff is the one duct taping everything together and running around with bowls, catching all the water. Like, it's not really working. That's probably the biggest challenge is, people say, oh yeah, we have online giving, because it's one of those things that you just don't really want to think about, or a lot of organizations that it's just, we have it, it doesn't really do too much. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. It's not doing much because it's the way it's set up. It's not
Yeah.
effective. Um, and that, and I think the proof is just in the numbers. And I'm going to put you on the spot. I mean, how many people do you think, for an organization, what percentage of their gifts do you think come in through their website?
Oh, it's probably less than 10%.
Yeah, it is less than 10%. It's like, I think it's less than 9%. Um, but what's interesting is over half of donors say they would prefer to give online. And so for me, when I look at that stat, that's where I'm like, something's wrong, because they want to give online, but they're not. And we work with organizations who are at the 50% mark, which shows me when the tools are right, the people will get there. But yeah, why they're behind is it's just one of those areas where, at least at most nonprofits, nobody's an expert in digital fundraising. I'm not talking about the fundraisers. It's like, how do you actually tie it together? I mean, if you have a tech team, that's usually out of their scope, from a web person that they can put your website together, but the actual implementation of systems like that. Um, and so that's where you find, that once something is there, then they don't want to touch it. And trying to get through to say, just because you have it doesn't mean you're doing it right at all. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's, what I've seen is, the biggest reason why people tend to be behind is that they just don't want to touch it. It's one of those unknown things that you just don't want to touch.
Yeah. And what I see happen a lot is you end up getting a champion, right? Like, so you've got someone inside the
Yeah.
organization that gets it. And oftentimes they can get stifled or frustrated, or they don't have access to the board or the decision maker, whoever. How do you help that person? How do you personally help that person, make the pitch to that audience?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that I do see the exact same thing, whether it's the fundraiser or whether it is the web person. Sometimes it's a consultant. Sometimes it's even, I've talked to some organizations where it's the data person. They're like, well, the data person who's responsible for reconciling all the data, if they're not on board, nothing's going to happen. So it really varies in every organization. Again, when the counter is always going to be, well, we have online giving. I think it's up to you to show there's better ways to do it. It's something we can implement, but the real key pieces are, it's going to save staff time and it can bring in more donations. And so I think giving them those stats that they can take and say, man, how many hours can we save every week, or how much more in donations can you help bring in? I think that's what's going to speak to the leadership, and at least in my experience.
We talked about going to work in the Navy. Um, I just know that that is something that sticks with you and is in your bones for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah.
half of my family was all military. Grandpa still served in the Pacific in World War II. My uncle in Vietnam. Another uncle was active duty in the Navy for 25 years. Um, how do you feel like your military background changes the way you run a business and run an impact business specifically?
So, I mean, there are two probably biggest things that stuck out. One is accountability, where I think back to things I would do in my pre-Navy years. Of course, I was also a lot younger. I don't like to look back on them very fondly, but learning accountability, not passing the buck, The other one, this is probably going to sound cliche talking about military stuff, is being mission focused. So, I was deployed on an aircraft carrier, and while you're there, I mean, you're living there, you're eating there, your entire life revolves around what you're doing, your mission. Um, and that stays with you. And I really struggled when I got out with the 9 to 5, because I'm not the 9 to 5 guy or 8 to 5 guy. It drives me crazy. I can't really just sit there for that long. Of course, I'll work from 10 a.m. 10 p.m. to midnight, or whatever hours make sense. I mean, I'm claim not to be a workaholic. I definitely work on the family work life balance, where you're really tied to what you do and you love what you do. It really ceases to become a job. But that's something that I carry out with the employees too. So they have something to accomplish, and when they do, and they say I got something else I need to go do X Y Z, I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm I don't need you just sitting around at your desk staring at a screen just because it's the right time. So I think those some of the skills, I think really just that mission mindedness of let's get something done and then let's go do something else.
No, that's awesome. I was just chatting. I did an interview yesterday with a woman that founded a tech nonprofit. They place kind of underprivileged, underestimated kids in New York City public schools in tech internships. Mm-hmm. And at the end, I asked her what her biggest goal was personally and for the organization in the next 5 years. And she said that she wants to get to more work-life balance because she's their biggest asset. And if she doesn't take care of herself, they won't get to do the great work they want to do. And I just thought that was like, my God, like what wisdom.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad about that being on your own.
Well, it's tough. At times you feel like you're working all the time, but to know you have to pull away and go just do something else. It's a work in progress. And I've been working from home for 5 years, and then when COVID hit, I'm like, yeah, I got this. And no, I mean, it was a totally different scenario with family and the stress levels and everything. So, it's always a challenge. But yeah, to me, it's one of those important things where if you need to go do something and it's the middle of the day and you can do it, go do it. To me, that's more work-life balance. And
yeah, and it's just like kind of a reframing of urgency. My family, immediate family is all very medical. My dad's a ear, nose, and throat surgeon. My sister's an anesthetist. And when I talk about something being urgent, and then I hear stories from them about like patients coding or someone with like terminal cancer, I'm like, it's not that urgent. It just like puts things into perspective. So I know you mentioned challenges with COVID and growing your startup. I've found so many similarities between problems I encounter as a startup and the nonprofits that I'm trying to help. And so I always like to ask, like, what is your best piece of advice as a tech company that you would give a nonprofit leader that might be facing similar challenges?
Yeah, so this is going to sound kind of contradictory, but I would say both staying focused and by staying broad-minded at the same time. One of the I think pitfalls that we have is we see application to what we're doing to so many verticals, and we want to approach all those, but you can't help everybody all the time, and so really just trying to pick here's where we're going to focus our efforts helps us stay on the right path. For nonprofits, it's kind of the same thing where a lot of the ones I work with, they're so mission minded on what they're doing and who they're serving. It's like they don't even think about fundraising. And I want to tell them, like, there are people in our community who will support you. You have to ask. And I wouldn't say I get frustrated, but when you have people who will launch a giving form and they never write appeals and they never do anything and they don't raise any money, I want to figure out how to help them better, because if you don't ask, you're not going to get money. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing, but even big organizations with a ton of affinity, and we saw it during COVID, when you stop asking for whatever reason, the money stops almost immediately. And then when they start back up, it goes back up. But it's kind of challenging because I don't want to tell people how to do their jobs but when you see the small organizations doing so much good work, I'm like, people will help you. They'll support you. And I'm on the board of a small nonprofit, and so I see it where I'm like, man, how do you do your mission, but also focus on things like fundraising, where that's kind of out of the scope of what the core teams do. Trying to get them to focus on, if you can work on that fundraising piece, you can grow your teams out and have an even bigger impact. Where that's the kind of thing I struggle with. Just again, you can get too focused where you're just focused on the mission and you ignore these other things that could also help your mission and help you help more people.
Ties back to your talking about accountability or about wanting to take care of yourself. There's an accountability not to do everything on your own, like not be afraid to ask for help, because you kind of need to be accountable for what's in your area of control and what's not. And I actually think that's a lesson that we can all learn from nonprofits, is they have to go out and ask for help every day. That's like their business model, right? Is to ask for help. And I think that's something I need to hear more. I can't do everything on my own. I need to ask for help a lot.
Yeah, and that's what we struggle with as a startup. As there's only so much we can do, and it's like, how do we get more people to join us? And
you as a technologist kind of like oozes out of you. You can just tell how excited you get about it, and the prospect of solving problems with technology and making that accessible to other people. It's just like you glow when you talk about it.
It's the sun, but yeah, I'll take it's the passion.
That too. I guess with that in mind, if you could wave a magic wand in the next 5 years and affect a big change with technology in the impact sector, what would it be?
It has more to do with the tech companies than anything else, where ideally I would like it to be a more open ecosystem where we all not necessarily collaborate, but integrate, because that has the biggest impact on the nonprofits. If we can tell them it's just going to work, and you don't have to download Excel spreadsheets every morning and import it into your CRM. There are some all-in-one products out there, but there's a lot of people who, we're piecing together, different systems because that's what works for them. And that's a lot of overhead on the staff. Right. So what I would like to see, and I met with a great company this week that works with donor relations and everything, and they have the same mindset. It's like, hey, what can we do so if they're giving through us, it ties in with what you're doing, and let's just automate it so they don't have to worry about it. And those are discussions I love having, because they're, even if you have kind of like an all-in-one system, there's still going to be other things that it's not going to do. You have call centers, you have text messaging, you have mobile apps, you have website, and usually those things might not talk to each other. And to me, that's just like a nightmare. And there are things we can do to automate that. Gift matching is another one. I don't know if I said that, but so if we can start tying all that in and just automating it, it's going to make a better experience, and that's going to help those teams focus on their mission more and not, I got 5 data syncs to do every morning. Oh, one broke, because I've seen it and I've lived it. And that was one of the reasons why I found the company, because I'm like, well, why do we have 5 different funnels digitally that are coming into different payment processors? And it was just kind of a nightmare. So that's what I would love to do in the next 5 years, is work with more companies to say, what can we do to take the burden? I mean, I just want to take the burden off of them totally and say, hey, we got this part of your business. You don't have to worry about it, about how everything's going to flow and what the security is, because we'll worry about that. You can just build your form and get it on your website and do what you need to be doing.
Right.
So that's what I would love to see. And that's ideal. But I have talked with a lot of companies that have that same mindset, which is very exciting to me, because it's not always like, and I've talked to some where I ask them, they're like, no, we just do our own thing.
Yeah, it's almost like we don't need more innovation. It's like we've got it all. We just make it all. That the real innovation is in the connectivity and the infrastructure.
Yeah, because I mean, we're all going to keep developing our products and doing our things, and there's great things that everybody's doing in their own little ways, and we all have our niches and how we're specializing in different aspects. But I think if we can start tying those together, to me, that's where it gets really exciting. I don't want to be a CRM. I don't want to be your mass emailer. But those are all critical to what you do. And then I feel like a roadblock if we don't play nicely with everybody, because then I'm putting the burden back on your team to say, okay, yeah, we collected a donation or a membership and we collected an email address, but now you got to upload it into, because our clients use all kinds of different CRMs, all kinds of different email clients. So the ideal world would be, we got that for you. Like, it's just going to be there. It's going to work. And things are going that direction. Like I said, there's a lot of companies out there who are, I think, have that same mindset.
Well, we can definitely hope and all work together and try to make it happen. So that's a great goal for the next 5 years, some cooperation. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. It is awesome hearing your story, and excited to share.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Love talking shop, and that could go on for another half hour.
Thanks for coming by. Be sure to visit joinpond.com and jump in when you're ready.